I had spent 2 full days preparing my son Brandon's favorite meal. The pot roast had been slow cooking since dawn, filling every corner of my house with the rich aroma of tender beef and herbs. The dining table gleamed under the chandelier my late husband Gerald and I had picked out 30 years ago. Homemade rolls sat golden and warm in a linen-lined basket. A 3-layer chocolate cake waited in the kitchen. As Brandon's guests arrived, I moved toward the table to take my seat. That's when my son stood up, pointed directly at me, and shouted words that made my blood run cold. "Get out of here! I didn't invite you." The silence that followed felt thick enough to choke on. I stood frozen in the doorway between my kitchen and dining room, my hands still gripping the serving spoon I'd been holding. 7 pairs of eyes stared at me. Brandon's girlfriend, Amber, sat to his right, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the table. 3 of his college friends occupied the far side, their expressions shifting between confusion and second-hand embarrassment. 2 co-workers from the marketing firm where Brandon worked rounded out the guest list. My mind struggled to process what had just happened. This was my home. These were my dishes, my tablecloth, my food. I had set every fork, folded every napkin, seasoned every vegetable that now sat steaming in my grandmother's serving bowls. 3 years ago, when Gerald died suddenly from a massive heart attack while raking leaves in our backyard, Brandon had moved back home. He told me it was temporary, that he wanted to help his grieving mother manage the bills and the loneliness of rattling around in a 4-bedroom house all by myself. I had been grateful. The silence after Gerald's death had been deafening. Having my son back under the same roof where we'd raised him felt like a small comfort during the darkest period of my life. But temporary became permanent. Months stretched into a year, then 2, then 3. Brandon's promised rent payments never materialized. He'd mention them occasionally, saying things like, "I'll get you some money next month. Mom or work's been slow, but I'll catch up soon." The groceries I bought disappeared twice as fast. The utility bills climbed higher. When Amber started staying over, first on weekends and then nearly every night, my water bill tripled. I found myself restocking shampoo, conditioner, and body wash every other week. I worked part-time at the Riverside Public Library, 25 hours a week shelving books and helping patrons navigate the computer system. Combined with Gerald's modest life insurance payout and my widow's pension, I managed to keep the bills paid. Barely. I'd started buying generic brands at the grocery store and keeping the thermostat lower in winter than I preferred. My own needs became smaller and smaller to accommodate my son's presence. Last Tuesday, Brandon had mentioned wanting to throw himself a birthday party. 30 felt like a milestone, he said. He wanted to celebrate with friends. When I offered to cook, his face had lit up with what I thought was genuine appreciation. "That would be great, Mom. Your pot roast is the best." I'd felt a flutter of warmth in my chest. Maybe this would be a turning point. Maybe the party would bring us closer together, help me feel less like an invisible roommate in my own home, and more like a mother again. I had assumed I would be part of the celebration. Why wouldn't I be? This was my house, my food, my effort. Now, as I stood trembling in my own dining room, Amber's voice cut through the uncomfortable silence. Brandon told us this was his house. She looked at me with something between pity and disdain. He said, "You were just the housekeeper he hired for the evening." The words hit me like a physical blow. Several guests shifted in their seats. Tyler, one of Brandon's friends from college, frowned and glanced at Brandon with clear confusion. Brandon's face flushed dark red, but he didn't correct her. He didn't say a word. His silence confirmed the lie more powerfully than any statement could have. My legs felt weak. My son had erased me. He hadn't just asked me to leave the room. He'd been telling people I didn't exist, at least not as his mother, not as the owner of this home, not as someone who mattered. I found my voice, though it came out quieter than I intended. Brandon, this is my house. I'm your mother. Amber laughed, a sharp sound that made me flinch. She looked at Brandon, clearly expecting him to join in the joke and explain the misunderstanding. When he remained silent, her smile faltered. Tyler set down his fork. "Wait, dude. You told us you owned this place. You said you'd been building equity for 5 years." Brandon's jaw tightened. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against my hardwood floors. "Mom, just go to your room. You're embarrassing me. This is my party with my friends." The emphasis he placed on those possessive words felt deliberate, like he was trying to stake a claim, establish dominance in front of witnesses. I noticed his coworkers exchanging glances. One woman, whose name I thought was Jessica, whispered something to the man beside her. My hands trembled, but I kept them steady at my sides. I looked at the table I had prepared. Each place setting had taken me several minutes to arrange just right. The flowers in the centerpiece had come from my own garden. The wine glasses catching the light were from the set Gerald and I had received as a wedding gift 42 years ago. Brandon pulled out his wallet and extracted 2 $20 bills. Without meeting my eyes, he threw them on the floor near my feet. The bills fluttered and landed next to my worn slippers. "I'll call you when we need dessert brought out," he said coldly. "That's what I'm paying you for." The humiliation burned through my chest like acid. I had given birth to this person. I had walked him to his first day of kindergarten, sat through every parent-teacher conference, cheered at every soccer game, helped him move into his first apartment after college. When his girlfriend before Amber had broken his heart, I had stayed up until 3 in the morning, listening to him cry. When he'd lost his first real job, I'd reassured him that setbacks were normal, that he had value and potential. And now he was throwing money at my feet like I was a servant who had displeased him. Before I could move, Amber reached down and picked up the bills. She handed them back to Brandon with a patronizing smile. "Baby, that's not enough. Quality caterers cost at least $200 for this kind of spread." She glanced at me over her shoulder. "He'll pay you properly later. Now please leave us alone." She genuinely believed it. Amber honestly thought I was hired help. Brandon had constructed an entire false reality, and he was willing to double down on the lie rather than admit the truth to his girlfriend and friends. The other guests looked increasingly uncomfortable, but not one of them spoke up. Not one person said, "Hey, this doesn't seem right." I felt anger rising beneath the humiliation, hot and unfamiliar. I'm not typically an angry person. Gerald used to joke that I had the patience of a saint. But standing there, watching my son choose his pride over basic decency, something shifted inside me. I bent down slowly, but I didn't pick up the money. Instead, I left the bills lying on the floor where Brandon had thrown them. Let them see what he'd done. Let the evidence sit there while they ate the meal I'd prepared. I walked toward the kitchen, forcing my steps to remain calm and measured. Behind me, I heard someone clear their throat awkwardly. Conversation resumed, stilted and uncomfortable, but it resumed. They were going to eat my food, sit at my table, and pretend nothing had happened. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white. Tears pressed hot against my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. Not while guests remained in my house. My gaze drifted to the small desk in the corner where Brandon always left his laptop. The screen glowed softly. He never bothered to close it or log out, too confident that I was too old, too trusting, too naive to pry into his business. I shouldn't look. I knew that, but something pulled me forward. Maybe it was the need to understand how my son had become someone I no longer recognized. Maybe it was simple self-preservation, an instinct that I needed to know what I was dealing with. The email inbox was open. My eyes scanned the subject lines, most of them unremarkable work correspondence and promotional messages. Then I saw it. Lease agreement, 447 Maple Street. That was my address. My hands shook as I clicked the email open. It was from a real estate attorney named Marcus Webb. The message was dated 3 weeks ago. Brandon, as discussed, I've prepared a preliminary brief regarding establishing legal tenancy at the property. Given that you've resided there for over 2 years and can demonstrate that it functions as your primary residence through utility bills, mail delivery, and vehicle registration, you have a strong foundation. The next step involves documenting the current owner's diminished capacity to manage the property independently. My breath caught in my throat. I scrolled down, clicking on other emails in the thread. There were more, going back months. One from 6 weeks ago detailed strategies for elderly occupant removal. The phrase made my stomach turn. Another email discussed how Brandon had been systematically having mail sent to the house addressed to Brandon Hughes, homeowner. He was using my utility bills I paid every month while he contributed nothing, as proof that he was the primary resident. A message from 2 weeks ago made me feel physically ill. Brandon had written to the attorney. The old woman's cognitive decline is becoming more apparent. She forgets conversations, misplaces items, sometimes seems confused about dates. I'm keeping a log as you suggested. I think we'll have enough documentation within the next few months. I wasn't experiencing cognitive decline. I forgot things occasionally, the way any person in their 60s did. I'd misplaced my reading glasses twice last month and found them exactly where I'd left them. I'd asked Brandon about a conversation we'd had, and he'd told me we'd never discussed it, but now I wondered if he'd been deliberately gaslighting me, creating evidence of confusion that didn't actually exist. The final email in the thread was from 5 days ago. Brandon had scheduled a consultation with an elder law attorney for next Tuesday. The stated purpose was discussing guardianship options and property transfer for incompetent senior. My son wasn't just disrespecting me. He wasn't just lying to his girlfriend. He was systematically plotting to take my house, the home Gerald and I had worked for decades to pay off, the place where we'd built our life together and raised our child. Brandon was planning to have me declared incompetent so he could seize control of my property and possibly have me removed from my own home. The pot roast I'd spent hours preparing suddenly smelled nauseating. I grabbed my phone from my pocket with shaking hands and quickly photographed the screen, capturing each damning email. Then I forwarded the most incriminating messages to my personal email address, each click of the mouse feeling like a small act of resistance. I stood in my kitchen, my phone clutched in my hand. Photographic evidence of my son's betrayal now safely stored in multiple locations. The sounds of conversation and laughter drifted in from the dining room. Someone made a joke. Amber's high-pitched giggle carried over the other voices. They were having a good time, eating my food, sitting at my table, in my house. While the man who had orchestrated all of this sat among them, accepting their birthday wishes, probably basking in their assumption that he was successful and independent. My initial shock was crystallizing into something else. Something harder and clearer. I thought about Gerald, about the way he'd worked double shifts at the factory for 3 years so we could afford the down payment on this house. I remembered the pride in his eyes the day we'd gotten the keys, the way he'd carried me over the threshold, even though we'd already been married for 12 years at that point. "Our castle. Shelley," he'd said. "Nobody can take this from us." But someone was trying. Our own son. I took several deep breaths, forcing my heartbeat to slow down. I needed to think strategically, not emotionally. Confronting Brandon right now, in front of his guests, wouldn't accomplish anything. He'd already shown he was willing to humiliate me publicly. He'd double down, make me look unstable or confused, probably use my anger as more evidence of cognitive decline. No. I needed help. I needed someone who understood the legal system and could advise me on how to protect myself. My friend Dorothy from the library immediately came to mind. We'd worked together for 8 years, shared countless coffee breaks, confided in each other about everything from health scares to relationship problems. I knew her daughter Christine was a real estate attorney, specialized in property law. Dorothy had mentioned it proudly countless times. But first, I needed to get through the rest of this evening. I needed to appear calm, collected, and completely in control of my faculties. If Brandon was building a case that I was confused or declining, I would prove the exact opposite. I opened the refrigerator and retrieved the chocolate cake I'd made. 3 layers of devil's food with dark chocolate ganache frosting. Brandon's favorite since childhood. I'd spent $90 on high-quality chocolate and real vanilla extract, money I probably should have saved, but had spent because I'd wanted to do something special for my son's 30th birthday. Now, looking at the cake, I felt only a cold sense of purpose. I placed 30 candles on top, arranged in a spiral pattern. I lit each one carefully, watching the small flames flicker to life. Then, I carried the cake into the dining room. The conversation died down as I entered. Brandon looked wary, his eyes following my movements. I could see him trying to figure out what I was thinking, whether I was going to cause another scene. I set the cake down directly in front of him, my movements gentle and deliberate. The candlelight cast dancing shadows across the table. Everyone's attention focused on the cake, on the traditional moment of a birthday celebration. "Happy birthday, Brandon," I said, my voice steady and warm. "Make a wish." He leaned forward, his breath ready to extinguish the candles, when I spoke again. "I wish I could tell everyone here the truth about this house and who really owns it." Brandon froze, his face inches from the flames. His eyes snapped up to meet mine. I smiled, the expression feeling strange on my face. "But I won't. Not yet." I let those 2 words hang in the air for a long moment. "Blow out your candles, sweetheart." The endearment came out perfectly natural, but the emphasis made it clear I was aware of something he didn't want me to know. Brandon's face had gone pale. His hands gripped the edge of the table. Amber looked between us, confused. "What truth?" "Brandon, what is she talking about?" Brandon's voice came out strained. "Nothing. She's confused. Probably early dementia or something." There it was. The accusation he'd been making in his emails to the attorney, now spoken aloud in front of witnesses. He was trying to plant seeds, make his case seem credible. I kept smiling. "Enjoy your party, Brandon. I'll be in my office making some important phone calls." I emphasized the word "my," just enough that several guests glanced around the room, perhaps noticing details they'd overlooked before. The family photos on the walls showing me and Gerald at various stages of our lives. The framed wedding photo on the mantel. The decorative plates I'd collected over decades displayed in the china cabinet. As I walked out of the dining room, I heard confused murmuring behind me. Tyler's voice carried. "Dude, is that really your mom? Because if it is, this is seriously messed up." I didn't hear Brandon's response. I was already heading to my home office. the small room at the back of the house that had been Gerald's study. My phone was already in my hand. I closed the office door behind me and sank into Gerald's old leather chair. It still smelled faintly of his cologne, even after 3 years. I kept a bottle of it in my nightstand drawer, opened it occasionally just to remember. "I need your help, Gerald," I whispered to the empty room. "I need to be strong enough for both of us right now." My hands were steadier as I scrolled through my contacts and found Dorothy's number. It was nearly 8:30 on a Saturday night, but Dorothy and I had the kind of friendship where emergency calls were understood and accepted. She answered on the second ring. "Shelley? Everything okay?" "No," I said simply. "Dorothy, I need Christine's number. It's urgent." I heard the concern sharpen in her voice. "What happened?" I gave her the abbreviated version. Brandon's party, the humiliation, the emails I'd found. With each sentence, Dorothy's responses became more heated. "That absolute piece of work?" she hissed. "Shelley, I'm so sorry. Hold on, I'm texting you Christine's cell right now. She told me to give it to friends if they ever needed legal help. Call her immediately. She won't mind, I promise." The text came through within seconds. I thanked Dorothy and dialed before I could second-guess myself. Christine Palmer answered, with a professional but friendly tone. "This is Christine." "Christine, this is Shelley Morgan. I'm a friend of your mother's from the library. I'm so sorry to call on a Saturday night, but I have a legal emergency involving my property and my son." "Mom just texted me," Christine said, her voice shifting to serious. She gave me a brief overview. "Can you come to my office first thing Monday morning? 8 o'clock? "Yes, thank you. In the meantime, don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything verbally that could be construed as giving him any ownership rights, and if you have documentation, bring it all. Every piece of paper related to the house. I have photos of emails on my phone. He's been planning to have me declared incompetent and take the house." Christine's sharp intake of breath was audible. "That's elder fraud. Bring everything Monday. We'll handle this." After we hung up, I sat for a moment, letting the weight of having an ally settle over me. Then I made my second call. "Christine, this is Shelley Morgan. I'm a friend of your mother's from the library. I'm so sorry to call on a Saturday night, but I have a legal emergency involving my property and my son." "Shelley? This is a nice surprise," Robert answered warmly. "Robert, I need to tell you something about Brandon." I laid out the entire situation again. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long, I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, Robert spoke, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I'm coming over right now." "No," I said firmly. "Come Monday morning. I have a meeting with a real estate attorney at 8. Can you be there? I could use the support. I'll be there at 7:30. "Shelley, I'm so damn sorry. Gerald would be heartbroken." "I know." After ending the call, I turned to the filing cabinet where I kept all our important documents. The bottom drawer held the house paperwork. The original deed with both mine and Gerald's names from 32 years ago, the updated deed after Gerald's death showing sole ownership transferred to me, the final mortgage payment receipt from 10 years ago, marking the house as fully paid off, our marriage certificate, Brandon's birth certificate, every property tax receipt for the past 3 decades. I photographed everything, backed up the photos to cloud storage, and made a separate folder on my computer. If Brandon wanted to play games with documentation, I'd show him what actual proof looked like. Upstairs, I could hear footsteps and voices. The party was winding down. Car doors slammed outside. Engines started. Amber's voice drifted through an open window. "Thanks for the party, babe. Your caterer did an amazing job. You should definitely hire her again." I closed my eyes and counted to 10. By 10:30, the house had gone quiet. I heard Brandon and Amber moving around upstairs in what had been the guest room but had become their de facto bedroom. I stayed in the office, going through every document again, making sure I hadn't missed anything. Around midnight, I finally went upstairs to my own bedroom. I locked the door, something I'd never done before in my own house. But tonight, I didn't trust my son not to do something desperate if he realized I'd discovered his plans. Sunday morning arrived with weak November sunlight filtering through my bedroom curtains. I'd barely slept, my mind running through scenarios and possibilities. When I went downstairs around 7, I was surprised to find Brandon already in the kitchen. He was cooking breakfast. Actual cooking, not just pouring cereal or making toast. The smell of bacon filled the air. Eggs sizzled in a pan. "Morning, Mom," he said, his tone aggressively cheerful. "I thought I'd make you breakfast, to thank you for the party last night." He was nervous. I could see it in the way he avoided direct eye contact, in the slightly too bright quality of his voice. He was trying to gauge what I knew, trying to smooth things over before they got complicated. "That's thoughtful," I said neutrally, pouring myself coffee. He plated eggs and bacon, set them in front of me with an almost courtly gesture. Then he sat across from me, his own plate untouched. "Mom, about last night. I'm sorry if I was harsh." The apology sounded rehearsed. "The guys were razzing me about still living with my mother at 30, So I played along with a joke, made it seem like this was my place. You understand, right? Just guy stuff. Stupid macho posturing. I didn't mean anything by it." He was rewriting the narrative, transforming deliberate cruelty into boyish shenanigans, making it my responsibility to be understanding and forgiving. I took a bite of eggs, chewed slowly, and nodded. "Of course, honey. I understand perfectly." The relief on his face was almost comical. His shoulders dropped, he picked up his fork and started eating. Then I added, almost as an afterthought, "By the way, I have some friends coming over Tuesday afternoon. You and Amber might want to make other plans for a few hours." Brandon's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "What friends?" "Just some people I need to talk to about the house. Maintenance issues, financial planning, that sort of thing." I watched panic flash across his face before he managed to hide it behind a mask of casual interest. "What kind of maintenance issues?" "Oh, nothing you need to worry about. Just boring homeowner stuff." I smiled at him over my coffee mug. "Eat your breakfast before it gets cold." Monday morning, I woke before dawn. I dressed carefully, choosing a navy blue pantsuit I'd worn to library board meetings, comfortable but professional-looking shoes, and the pearl earrings Gerald had given me for our 30th anniversary. I wanted to look competent, put together, like someone clearly in full possession of her mental faculties. Robert pulled up to my house at 7:20, 10 minutes early, just like him. He hugged me tightly on the front porch. "You doing okay?" he asked, searching my face. "I'm furious," I admitted, "but I'm channeling it productively." He smiled grimly. "Good. Gerald always said you had steel in your spine when it counted." Christine Palmer's office was in a modern building downtown, all glass and chrome. She met us in the lobby herself, a tall woman in her late 30s with Dorothy's kind eyes and a firm handshake. In her office, I laid out everything. The printed emails I'd forwarded to myself and printed at the library, the photos of the house documents, the timeline of Brandon's residence and his failure to contribute financially, the specific threats in his correspondence with the other attorney. Christine read through everything methodically, making notes on a legal pad. When she finished, she looked up at me with a mixture of sympathy and professional determination. "Mrs. Morgan, Your son has no legal claim to this property whatsoever. The house is entirely in your name, paid off, with clear title. However, because he's been living there for 3 years, he does technically have tenant rights. If you want him out, you'll need to formally evict him. I can file that paperwork today. 30-day notice, standard procedure. Do it, I said without hesitation. Christine nodded. I'm also preparing a cease and desist letter regarding his fraudulent claims of ownership and his attempts to establish false documentation. If he continues pursuing this, we can file for a restraining order and report him for attempted elder fraud. That's a serious crime. Robert leaned forward. What about confronting him directly? With witnesses? Christine considered this. It's not standard procedure, but sometimes direct confrontation, especially with legal representation present, can be effective. It removes any ambiguity, makes it clear that his plans are known and there will be consequences. I thought about Brandon's face when I'd mentioned having people over on Tuesday. His fear, his panic at losing control of the narrative he'd constructed. Let's do it, I said. Tuesday afternoon, 2 o'clock, here at the house. Christine agreed and said she'd prepare all the necessary documents. Tuesday morning, I cleaned the house. Not because it needed it, but because I needed something to do with my hands. Brandon had already left for work, calling out a casual goodbye as if nothing was wrong. Amber had spent Monday night at her own apartment, to my relief. At 1:30, I set out coffee and cookies in the living room. Dorothy had asked if she could come for moral support, and I'd gratefully accepted. She arrived first, giving me a long hug. "You're doing the right thing," she whispered. Christine arrived at 1:50, briefcase in hand, professional armor in place. Robert pulled up right behind her. At exactly 2 o'clock, Brandon walked through the front door. He stopped short when he saw the assembled group. "What's going on?" His voice held forced casualness, but his eyes were wary. I gestured to the couch. "Sit down, Brandon. We need to talk about your future living arrangements." He remained standing. "I have plans with Amber tonight. I can't stay long. Sit down." My voice came out harder than I'd ever spoken to him before. Saturday. Christine set her briefcase on the coffee table, opened it, and extracted a folder. "Mr. Hughes, my name is Christine Palmer. I'm Mrs. Morgan's attorney." She placed printed copies of the emails on the table, facing him. Brandon's face drained of all color. His eyes darted to me, then back to the papers, then to Christine. Before she could continue, Amber walked in through the front door. She must have been planning to meet Brandon here. She carried takeout bags from a Thai restaurant, clearly intending a cozy dinner. "Hey, babe, I got that." She trailed off, taking in the scene. "What's happening?" Amber set down the food and picked up one of the printed emails. I watched her face as she read, saw the exact moment comprehension dawned. She read aloud, her voice shaking. "Convince current elderly occupant to sign over deed. Document cognitive decline. Establish grounds for guardianship." She looked up at Brandon, then at me. "You told me this was your house. You told me your mother died 5 years ago." The room went completely silent. Even Christine seemed stunned by this revelation. "Hey, babe, I got that." She trailed off, taking in the scene. "What's happening?" She turned to me, her mascara already starting to run. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. He showed me documents, pictures of himself as a kid in this house. He said it was his childhood home, which technically wasn't a lie, but he made it sound like he inherited it. He said his parents were both dead, and the house was his." Her hands trembled as she set the paper down. I believed everything. When he asked me to move in 6 months ago, I thought I was moving into my boyfriend's house. I've been splitting groceries with him, paying for half the utilities when I'm here, which is most of the time now. I thought I was contributing to our household." She whirled back to Brandon. "But it wasn't our household. It was never your house. You've been stealing from your own mother, lying to me, planning to commit fraud." She grabbed her purse from where she'd dropped it. "We're done, Brandon. This is sick. This is beyond anything I could ever forgive." "Amber, wait," Brandon started, reaching for her. She jerked away from his touch like he'd burned her. Don't ever contact me again. I mean it." The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the pictures on the wall. The sound of her car starting and then speeding away filled the awkward silence she left behind. Brandon slumped back on the couch, his head in his hands. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Robert stood up and moved to tower over his nephew. "Your father spent his entire adult life working to give your mother security. He worked double shifts, took extra jobs, sacrificed vacations and new cars and dozens of little comforts so they could pay off this house. He wanted to make sure that if anything happened to him, Shelley would be taken care of." His voice was thick with disgust. "And you, his son, the kid he was so damn proud of, you decided to repay that sacrifice by trying to steal the one thing he made sure your mother would always have. You tried to have her declared incompetent. Your own mother. The woman who gave birth to you, raised you, welcomed you back when you needed a place to stay." Brandon's shoulders shook. I couldn't tell if he was crying or just trying to hide. Christine cleared her throat, bringing us back to the legal reality. "Mr. Hughes, let me be clear about your situation. You have no claim to this property. Zero. The house is entirely in your mother's name. Your emails demonstrate clear intent to commit elder fraud, which is a felony in this state. I could report this to the authorities right now, and you would likely face criminal charges." She let that sink in before continuing. "However, your mother will be making the decision about whether to press charges. Regardless, you are being formally evicted. You have 30 days to vacate the premises." She slid the eviction notice across the table. Brandon stared at it without picking it up. I finally spoke, my voice steady despite the emotion churning in my chest. "Brandon, I loved you enough to welcome you home when you needed a place to land. After your father died, having you here made me feel less alone. I never asked you for rent because I thought you were saving money, getting back on your feet. I fed you, I did your laundry. I asked for nothing in return except maybe some company, some conversation, some acknowledgement that I existed." I stood up and moved to stand in front of him, forcing him to look at me. "And you repaid me by trying to steal my home, by planning to have me declared incompetent and possibly institutionalized, by erasing my existence to your girlfriend and friends, by humiliating me in front of strangers in my own dining room." A tear rolled down Brandon's cheek. "Mom, I'm not finished." My voice cracked but held firm. "Your father would be ashamed of what you've become. He worked himself into an early grave to provide for this family, to make sure we had stability and security. And you spat on that sacrifice." Brandon's face crumpled completely. "I felt like such a failure," he sobbed. 30 years old and still living with my mom. All my friends from college have houses, families, careers. I have a decent job, but not enough saved for a down payment anywhere in this city. Amber comes from money. Her parents have a vacation home in Aspen. I wanted her to think I was successful, that I had something to offer. "So you lied," I said flatly. "And when the lies got too big, you decided the solution was to take my house instead of being honest. I know it was wrong. The lies kept building, and I didn't know how to stop them without losing everything. Without losing her. You lost her anyway, Robert said coldly. And you should have. You don't build a relationship on lies, Christine interjected. Mrs. Morgan, what would you like to do about the criminal aspect? I looked at my son, really looked at him. Beneath the 30-year-old man who'd tried to commit fraud against me, I could still see traces of the little boy who'd cried when his goldfish died, who'd made me Mother's Day cards covered in glitter and crayon hearts, who'd hugged me so tight at his high school graduation and whispered, I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. I won't press charges, I said slowly, on 2 conditions. Brandon looked up, hope and fear mixing on his face. First, you sign an acknowledgement, prepared by Christine, that you have absolutely no claim to this property, now or ever. You forfeit any potential inheritance related to this house. When I die, this house will go to charity, or to Robert, or to whoever I damn well please. But it will not go to you. He flinched, but nodded. Second, you get therapy. Real therapy with a licensed counselor, not some life coach or online guru. You have deep issues with honesty, entitlement, and how you treat people. You need professional help, and you need to commit to at least a year of weekly sessions. You will provide Christine with proof that you're attending. I'll do it, he whispered. I promise. And finally, you do not contact me again until you've genuinely changed. Not a few sessions in, not when you think enough time has passed that I might have forgiven you, when you have actually done the work to become someone your father would recognize. Christine pulled out 2 additional documents. I took the liberty of anticipating some of this. Mrs. Morgan, I have a promissory note prepared. Brandon has lived rent-free in your house for 3 years. Fair market rent for a room in this neighborhood would be approximately $500 per month. That's $18,000 in back rent. She slid the document toward Brandon. You'll pay $300 per month until the debt is paid in full. Consider it a very generous payment plan. Miss a single payment, and the full amount becomes immediately due, plus interest, and we'll be revisiting the criminal fraud charges. Brandon's hands shook as he signed the property acknowledgement and the promissory note. Christine witnessed both documents, as did Robert and Dorothy. Everything legal, binding, witnessed. When it was done, Brandon stood on unsteady legs. I'll start packing tonight. I'll be out before the 30 days are up. Make it sooner, Robert said coldly. After Brandon left the room, I heard his footsteps climbing the stairs to what had been his room. Christine packed up her briefcase. Call me if he gives you any trouble, she said. Or if you change your mind about pressing charges, you have every right to do so. I know, I said. Thank you, Christine. After they all left, I sat alone in my living room. The house felt different already, lighter somehow, even with Brandon still upstairs packing. I had taken my power back. I had stood up for myself and demanded to be treated with basic human dignity. Brandon moved out 29 days later, leaving on a Saturday morning while I was at the library. When I came home, his room was empty, except for a note on the stripped bed. Mom, I've started therapy. Dr. Richardson on Oak Street. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I wanted you to know I'm keeping my promise. I'm sorry for everything. I understand if you never forgive me. Dad would be ashamed of me, and he should be. I'm ashamed of myself. The first rent payment arrived in my mailbox 3 days later, a money order for $300 with no note attached. Over the following weeks, I slowly transformed Brandon's old room. I painted the walls a soft sage green, brought in my sewing machine and craft supplies, hung curtains I'd made myself. The room became mine, a space for hobbies I'd neglected while trying to be accommodating and invisible. Dorothy and I started having lunch every Saturday at a cafe near the library. Christine became a regular visitor, often stopping by for coffee and conversation. She reminded me of what strong women could accomplish when they supported each other. Robert drove down every other Sunday for dinner. We'd cook together, sharing stories about Gerald, keeping his memory alive through laughter and reminiscence instead of grief. 6 months after Brandon moved out, I received a letter. The envelope was thick, multiple pages. The return address was Brandon's new apartment across town. I almost didn't open it. Part of me wanted to throw it away, maintain the boundary I'd established. But curiosity, and perhaps a small remaining thread of maternal connection, made me carefully slit the envelope open. The letter was 4 pages long, handwritten in Brandon's neat print. "Mom, I don't expect you to read this, and I definitely don't expect you to respond. But Dr. Richardson suggested I write down everything I need to say, whether or not I ever send it. I decided to send it because you deserve to hear this, even if you throw it away unread. I've been in therapy for 6 months now. We've unpacked a lot of things I didn't want to face. The truth is, after Dad died, I felt like I lost my roadmap. He was the man I was trying to become, and suddenly he was gone. Moving back home was supposed to be temporary, but somewhere along the way, it became comfortable. Too comfortable. I started resenting the fact that I needed your help, even though you never made me feel bad about it. That resentment turned toxic. I wanted to be the successful son Dad had been proud of, but I couldn't figure out how to become that person. So I faked it. I created a version of myself that didn't need help, that had his life together. A version that Amber could be proud of. The lies built on themselves. Once I told Amber the house was mine, I had to keep up the fiction. When my college friends assumed I was doing well, I encouraged that assumption. The more I lied, the more desperate I became to make the lies true. After they all left, I sat alone in my living room. The house felt different already, lighter somehow. Even with Brandon still upstairs packing. I had taken my power back. I had stood up for myself and demanded to be treated with basic human dignity. Dr. Richardson says I was trying to take shortcuts to feeling successful instead of doing the actual work of becoming a better person. He's right. I wanted the appearance of success without the effort. I've learned something important in these 6 months. You can't build a life on lies and theft. Real success, real manhood, real character comes from honesty, hard work, and treating people with respect, especially the people who love you most. Dad wouldn't recognize the person I became, but I'm working on becoming someone he would recognize, someone who deserves to call himself Gerald Hughes's son. I'm working 2 jobs now, the marketing job during the day, and I'm bartending 3 nights a week. I'm living in a tiny studio apartment that costs too much and has roaches, but I'm paying for it myself. All of it. Rent, utilities, food, everything. And it feels better than living in comfort bought with dishonesty. I'm saving money for the first time in my life. Real saving, with goals and a budget. I want to buy my own place someday. A small place, nothing fancy, but mine. Earned honestly. I'm also volunteering at a senior center on weekends, helping elderly residents with technology and home maintenance tasks. Dr. Richardson suggested it as a way to confront how I'd treated you, to see seniors as full human beings, deserving of respect and dignity. It's been humbling and enlightening. I'm enclosing a check for $3,000. It's not the full amount I owe you, not even close. But it's everything I've managed to save, beyond my regular monthly payments. I want you to have it. Maybe use it for something just for yourself. Take a trip, redecorate, buy something impractical and beautiful. You spent so many years taking care of Dad and me. You deserve to be taken care of too. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking to come over for Sunday dinner or to have things go back to how they were. I know I destroyed that possibility. I'm just asking that you know I'm doing the work. I'm becoming someone better, someone Dad would recognize. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. You deserved a son who saw your sacrifices and appreciated them, who treated you with love and respect, who made you feel valued in your own home. I failed at all of that. But I'm trying to become the son you deserve to have. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. If you never want to see me again, I understand that too. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. I love you, Mom. I should have said that more often. I should have shown it better. Brandon. I read the letter 3 times, sitting at my kitchen table with tears streaming down my face. They weren't tears of sadness exactly. They were complex tears, mixing grief for what had been lost, hope for what might be healed, pride that my son was finally taking responsibility, and relief that maybe, eventually, some form of relationship might be possible. The check was real. $3,000. I held it for a long time, thinking about what to do with it. Finally, I picked up my phone and called Robert. "Can you help me plan a trip?" I asked. "I think I'd like to see the Grand Canyon. Gerald always wanted to go, but we never made it." "I'd love to," Robert said warmly. "It's about time you did something just for yourself." That evening, I sat down at my small desk and pulled out stationery. I wrote carefully, choosing each word. "Brandon, I received your letter and the check. Thank you for both. I'm proud that you're doing the work to become a better person. Change is hard, especially when it requires admitting we were wrong. The fact that you're willing to face, that says something important about your character, or at least about the character you're building. I'm not ready for regular contact yet. The hurt is still too fresh, and I need more time, but I'm not closing the door permanently. Keep going to therapy. Keep being honest with yourself and others. Keep doing the work. When you're ready, really ready, when you've become the person Dad would recognize, call me. We'll have coffee. We'll talk. We'll see what's possible. This is still your mother's house. It always will be. But maybe someday there will be a place for you at my table again. Not because you're entitled to it, but because you've earned it through genuine change and growth. I'm using your money to take a trip to the Grand Canyon. Dad always wanted to see it. I'll take pictures for both of us. I love you too. I always have. Love doesn't mean accepting abuse or disrespect. Love can have boundaries and still be real. I'm learning that, and I hope you are too. Mom. I mailed the letter the next morning. 3 months later, I stood at the edge of the Grand Canyon with Robert, watching the sunset paint the ancient rock in shades of orange and gold. The wind was cool on my face. The vastness before me felt like possibility, like hope, like the future spreading out with room for healing and growth. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the humiliation, the fight to reclaim my dignity and my home. I thought about the strength I'd discovered in myself, the friends who'd stood beside me, the professional women like Christine who'd helped me protect what was mine. Most of all, I thought about the lesson I'd learned, the one I wished I'd understood years earlier. I'd spent so much of my life trying to be accommodating, trying to make things easier for others, trying not to be a burden. After Gerald died, I'd shrunk myself even further, as if I didn't deserve to take up space in my own life. I'd let Brandon walk all over me because I was afraid that setting boundaries would mean losing him completely. But boundaries weren't walls. They were foundations. You couldn't build a healthy relationship on a foundation of disrespect and resentment. Real love required real respect, and respect required boundaries. By standing up for myself, by demanding to be treated with basic human dignity, I hadn't pushed Brandon away. I'd given him the opportunity to grow into someone worthy of being in my life. Whether he took that opportunity was up to him. As for me, I'd learned that I was stronger than I thought, that asking for help wasn't weakness, that protecting myself and my home wasn't selfish, that I had value independent of my role as wife and mother. Gerald had left me this house as security, but I'd learned that true security didn't come from four walls and a roof. It came from knowing your own worth, from standing firm in your boundaries, from surrounding yourself with people who treated you with respect. The house was still mine. My home, my sanctuary, my space to be fully myself. And I had learned something profound that I wanted to share. Love without boundaries becomes a prison for everyone involved. By letting my son disrespect me, by accepting less than I deserved because I was afraid of conflict or abandonment, I hadn't helped him grow. I'd enabled him to become smaller, meaner, more dishonest. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stand firm in your worth and demand that others rise to meet you there. Sometimes you have to let people face the consequences of their actions, even when those people are your children, especially when those people are your children. Your home, whether it's four walls or your own heart, should never be a place where you feel small. It should be a place where you can be fully yourself, where you're treated with dignity, where your needs matter as much as anyone else's. And forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean accepting unacceptable behavior. Forgiveness means remembering who you are, what you deserve, and choosing your own peace over someone else's comfort. It means being willing to rebuild, but only on a foundation of mutual respect. I learned that I could stand alone if I needed to, but I also learned that I didn't have to. There were people who valued me, who respected me, who would stand beside me when I needed support. Building those connections, nurturing those friendships, asking for help when I needed it, those weren't signs of weakness. They were signs of wisdom. As the sun dipped below the canyon rim, painting the sky in impossible colors, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not just peace, but genuine hope. Hope for my own future, whatever shape it might take. Hope that Brandon might actually do the work and become someone I could have a healthy relationship with. Hope that I could continue growing and discovering who I was beyond the roles I'd played for others. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the sunset, the vast canyon, the infinite sky. I sent it to Dorothy with a simple message. "I'm here. I made it. Thank you for everything." Her response came quickly. "You always had the strength. You just needed to remember it. So proud of you." I thought about Brandon, working 2 jobs, living in his roach-infested studio, doing the hard work of becoming better. I hoped he'd make it. I hoped he'd become someone his father would recognize and I could be proud of again. But whether he did or didn't, I would be okay. I had reclaimed myself. I had learned to stand firm. I had discovered that being kind didn't mean being a doormat, that being loving didn't mean accepting abuse. And that lesson, hard-won and dearly bought, was worth everything. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever found yourself shrinking to make others comfortable? Have you let someone take advantage of your kindness because you were afraid of conflict or loss? What boundaries do you wish you'd set sooner? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find the courage to stand up for themselves. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like. Subscribe to hear more stories about real people facing real challenges and finding their strength. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to demand respect, to reclaim your space in the world. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that you are stronger than you think, that you deserve to be treated with dignity, and that your home, whether it's a house or your heart, belongs to you. Protect it fiercely. You're worth it.